Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, host of the free iTunes podcast, Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike, but that's not why I'm here today. This is another Saving Savvy episode, and in this particular episode, I'm going to give you my personal opinion on the Sony RX10 Mark IV, a camera that was introduced a number of months back, still very relevant, kind of an amazing camera. Now, I really want you to understand that this is my opinion, and if you look at any review, even if the person tries to be pretty unbiased, it is their opinion. We all have opinions, so your opinion may vary, and that's totally fine. I'll also say that I actually purchased this camera with my own money, so this is not something that was given to me by Sony, and that won't sway my opinion. Also, I was not flown out to an exotic location or to some fancy press release for this camera. I'm just testing it out in the Midwest where I live. So this really is not being biased by Sony as far as I can tell at all. So what is this camera and who is it intended for? Well, it's what's called and by the way, this particular review, just because of this type of camera, is geared more towards the newer photographer. So just be aware of that. So this camera is what's called a bridge camera. A bridge camera sort of looks like a fancy DSLR, but it's all one unit. So the lens is connected to the body. It's not removable, and it's kind of a one-piece sort of fits-all sort of camera that typically has a very long zoom range. So you can say you have a wide-angle shot and then zoom way, way out and look at things in the distance. Now, there have been bridge cameras out forever, and the majority of them are not very good. So if you go looking at Best Buy or Target and you see a bridge camera for $250 or maybe even $450, it's probably not that good, and it really can't compare to this camera, which is by far the most advanced bridge camera ever made. It's also the most expensive at around $1,700. Wow. That is an incredibly expensive bridge camera. But what makes it different? Well, just about everything. So when Sony designed this camera, they really did not hold back anything. And they put premium components into this camera as if it was a very expensive DSLR or pro-level camera. But it's not really a pro-level camera. So what did they do? Well, the first thing to talk about is the sensor. So this has a 1-inch sensor. That's the size of the sensor, which is considerably bigger than the sensors in most bridge camera by a great magnitude. That means that sensor is going to gather light better, which means it's going to perform better in low light, and it's also going to have more dynamic range, which just is a property that makes the photos look more realistic. It's also a highly sophisticated sensor. So it has backside illumination, which means that basically it's designed to gather even more light than the typical sensor. It also has an amazing feature built into it, which is called phase detection. So most of these bridge cameras will use contrast detection for their focusing. Contrast detection is very accurate, but it's slow. Phase detection is super fast, and a lot of big cameras might have 9 or 10 or 30 phase detection points. This has over 300 phase detection points, and they're built right on the chip, which is like unbelievable. The other thing this has is circuitry built right on the chip that allows it to offload data very quickly. And that's going to prevent certain problems, something called rolling shutter and other issues that a lot of cameras face. So if you're panning very fast with your movie mode, you're not going to see everything kind of slant to the side. It's going to be more vertical because of that ability to dump data faster. So right off, you can see that just based on this one component, it's an amazing camera. So this has a 24 wide, which is pretty wide, to 600 millimeter equivalent zoom lens, which is pretty far away. This zoom lens is relatively fast, which means it's going to gather more light. But the amazing thing about the zoom lens is that it's uniformly sharp from its widest angle to its most telephoto angle. Again, not typical at all. It costs a lot of money to produce a lens like that. So even on some consumer level interchangeable lenses, you will not see that quality. The lens is soft in one spot or another, but this lens is uniformly sharp. So again, Sony spared no expense in designing that lens. In fact, there's so much glass in here that the sensor is way back here. All of this is lens, and of course when you turn it on, that lens extends even further, as you can see here. So Tons of glass, very, very complex, not typical at all, but you're getting it in this very expensive camera. The camera is also, although it feels kind of like plasticky, I think it is magnesium alloy, but it's also weather sealed. And so if you're in a light rain, it's not going to ruin the camera. Now, I'm not saying you don't take this in the pool with you, but for just a little bit of stuff that might ruin another camera, this camera is not going to be ruined. It has extras like a microphone and headphone jack. So you can attach an external microphone when you're making movie recordings. And the movie mode on this camera is spectacular for the type of camera that it is. It will record in 4K at fairly high bit rates, which means that you're going to get really excellent pictures, especially when, or photo, or movies, I should say, especially when you combine it with this excellent lens and that sensor that's going to dump data very quickly. It really is an outstanding movie machine too. Far better than a lot of other cameras. It has a tilty sort of screen on the bottom, so you can get high or get low without having to stretch high or stretch low. It has a very nice electronic viewfinder, and that's great because if you want to study the camera or if it's really bright out, you can easily do this, and that's going to steady the camera and give you a better shot, and you're going to be able to see more of what you're looking at. It has a display on top as well as a display on the back. You see it in more professional types of cameras, and it has all sorts of manual controls. This is probably one of the most configurable cameras out there. Sony is great at allowing you to customize just about everything that you would want to customize on a camera. That could be good or bad. It could be good because you really get the exact camera that you want. It can be bad because it can be overwhelming even for someone like me, and I've been taking pictures for a very, very long time. And since these are customizable buttons, they're labeled with things like C1 and C2, so you're going to have to remember in your head, C1 is to change ISO, C2 is to change the focus point, or whatever, however you program it. That can be a little challenging at first. I mean, of course you can work through that, but it's not going to be easy if you pick up this camera every couple of weeks, because you're going to have to relearn all that stuff, maybe spend a few minutes with it before you go out and you shoot. So it has that going on. It has a phenomenal burst rate. What a burst rate is that I can press the button down and take a rapid fire succession of shots. Like so if I want to capture some movement or someone throwing a football or something, I can get that exact moment perfectly. This will actually take well over 20 shots a second. Now, in the day, a very good DSLR, they would take maybe 9 or 10 or 11 shots a second. That was considered exceptionally fast. This is taking over 20 shots per second. That's going to use up a lot of memory on your memory card, but still it gives you that option if you want that option. Now, there's some things that I don't like about this camera. So for such an expensive camera, it is plagued by this fancy lens, because when I turn it on, it takes a while before it's ready to shoot. Now, that doesn't seem very long, but a DSLR would be much quicker. It also has a relatively small battery. So definitely want to get a spare battery. They're not very expensive, but you have to remember to charge it and make sure that you have it with you so you don't go dead right in the middle of something. And that's especially the case if you're doing a lot of video work. What else did I like about it? Well, I think for the price, it feels a little cheap to me. That's just my opinion. I think it feels very great and sturdy if you're just talking about a bridge camera, but this is a very expensive camera. So, number one, most expensive camera. Number two, most sophisticated camera. Is it worth the money? You know, it really is. The Sony engineers have put just the most unbelievable stuff in this camera. It's mind-boggling what they've stuck in this camera. And again, if you're looking at those cheap cameras at Best Buy, those are apple and orange comparison. Those are nothing at all like this camera. So who is it for? Is it for the professional? Not really. Is it for the enthusiast? Maybe as a secondary camera. Is it for the hobbyist, the person who's interested in developing their interest in photography or their skill in photography? I think so, because it's all in one, and even though it's expensive, if you bought a interchangeable lens camera with even some of the lenses to give you the range that this camera gives you, you'd be spending a lot of money. And because this doesn't have the biggest sensor, but it has a big and sophisticated sensor, image quality is quite good. But I think these types of cameras are generally designed for family people. So, you know, this is the all-in-one camera that people buy because it's great on vacations, it's great for the little Christmas shot, it's great for the parties, it's great for the soccer game, it's great for the little school productions. That's why people buy bridge cameras. In those settings, this camera is going to be just phenomenally good. Now, would I recommend this camera if you came up to me and you said, Mike, I have a family, a couple of kids, and a spouse, and what would you recommend this camera? I might not. Not because it isn't super awesome, but because it's just so expensive, and you could get a significantly less expensive camera that will give you not all of these capabilities, but many of them. So again, avoid those super cheap cameras that look like this, but they're just junk. However, Panasonic makes a couple of cameras that are very, very good. One is the FZ2000. That's a camera that has the same zoom range as this camera. It also has a less sophisticated but a large 1-inch sensor. The lens is a little bit soft with that camera, but it's going to do you just fine. Their earlier model, the FZ1000, is actually a camera that I have that also has the 1-inch sensor, not quite as big of a zoom, but pretty fast lens, pretty sharp lens. I love that camera, and you could probably get that camera now for about $600, $1,700, $600. Sony also makes some RX series cameras that are older models that you can still get. So this is the Series 4, the most expensive. Well, you can buy the Series 3, the Series 2, the Series 1. All those are wonderful, wonderful cameras. They don't have the phase detection on the chip, but they have a lot of the features. Each varies a little bit, so I'm not going to go into that right now. But many of those would suit the needs of many family shooters. Great pictures for a lot less money. In fact, there's a camera called the Panasonic FZ300. I have the FZ200. The 300 is very similar. This uses a much smaller sensor, but the optics and everything are so good that if you really have a budget, I would recommend that FZ300 camera. I have a friend that will send me pictures from that camera. They look beautiful to me. So it's really the art of photography, not so much just even the equipment that you're using. So those are some recommendations. Again, super awesome camera. Your opinion might say, hey, it's totally worth it. Or your opinion might say it's not overpriced by any shape. It's not overpriced, but you might say it's too expensive. That might be the case. You might say you could buy like an independent or an interchangeable lens camera for that cost, which is true. It's really going to be what you want. But again, hats off to Sony for coming up with such an amazing product, really just pushing the boundaries of what we consider a bridge camera. Nothing quite like this in 2018. If you get some time, please give my podcast a listen. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist, so I'm a medical doctor. My wife is a licensed clinical psychologist, so she has a PhD in clinical psychology. And we talk about a variety of stuff, including our kids and just whatever we can think about. This last talk was on autism in 2018. My wife just went to a state-of-the-art conference, and so we thought we'd bring some of that information to our listeners. I also have a personal writing blog called drmikekuna.com, drmikekuna.com. It's it's really an experiment to see how willing I am to share my feelings in a public forum. And unfortunately or fortunately, I've been pretty willing, so I want to know all kind of details about my personal life and me. You could go to that blog. But the other thrust of that blog is I'm starting to write the stories of other people. So I explain why on drmikekuna.com. But if you want to read, I've just done one story. I have two more. Well, actually, I have about 5 more books, but I have 2 more in the coming up in the next couple of weeks. And so I'm writing these personal stories. If you think you have a story to tell, contact me. Go to the blog and read what I'm looking for. If you think you fit that criteria, contact me and maybe you will appear on my blog. The idea is that if this goes well, these stories could become a book. So you could be in a book. Maybe you'd like that. Maybe you wouldn't. Anyways, take care, everyone. Have a great day. And please subscribe. And please, please, please give me a thumbs up if you like it. Give me a thumbs down if you don't. That's okay too. But the subscribe part, I really would like if you could do that. I'm saying that because I am getting very, very close to 4,000 subscriptions. Now, I know that sounds like nothing compared to these people that have 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million or 5 million or whatever. It's a big deal for me because it would be a cool number to get. So anyways, take care. Bye-bye.